Let's get a quick take on Representative Ken Buck's sudden prominence in President Trump's Twitter feed for a position that he changed on the American Health Care Act. Buck has come under criticism for switching his stated support of the bill after telling 9 News and the Denver Post that he, quote, wasn't sold on the bill before the vote was supposed to happen last Friday. Patty Calhoun from Westward, this sounds like, when you look just at the politics of the situation, especially since President Trump came out against the Freedom Caucus, that Ken Buck looked at the tea leaves and said it is much better to beat the president than necessarily beat the Freedom Caucus. Will that move end up hurting him later?
Oh, it certainly could. But at this moment, let's face it, it's so nice to have anyone in Washington saying anything nice about Colorado, because we'll talk about this more later. But so Trump says something nice about Ken Buck, but meanwhile, Jeff Sessions is beating up Colorado right and left over cannabis and sanctuary cities. With Betsy DeVos, we'll talk about her too. We are, for some reason, in the spotlight in Washington, D.C., and I would rather if we could operate a little more in the dark.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. The Freedom Caucus was a serious thorn in President Trump's side last week, but it's been a thorn in the establishment GOP side for, I guess, 7 years. Do you think this move by Ken Buck shows that it could be a little more fractured than we thought?
Sure, because there's, as with any caucus, there's different members who have all their different districts and interests. I think he would have been better to stick with his original position, because the core problem with the Ryan bill had some good features in it, but it's would make even worse the death spiral that Obamacare's in. It's not sustainable, it's failing, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And the replacement bill didn't solve that, and probably would have aggravated the conditions on that. And until you get to the core problem of Obamacare, which is you think you can buy insurance for something way below the market rate, and get subsidized by other people who are going to be so stupid that they buy insurance that's vastly more expensive than they need. That's not a viable system, and the Ryan bill left that terrible problem in place.
Penfield Tate joins us, attorney at QTAC Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker. Kind of flip-flops are going back and saying that I was for it before I was against it kind of things. Those happen in politics. That's not terribly surprising. But the power decision here between President Trump going after the Freedom Caucus and threatening primaries a good 2.5 months into his presidency of a real strong conservative part of the House, and Ken Buck making a pretty clear political decision, that puts a little different flavor to it. What are your thoughts?
You know, it does put a different flavor on it, and you're right. Flip-flopping or changing positions is not uncommon, and we sort of accept it so long as the person declares why they're changing position and what drove it. And in Ken Buck's case, the reason he is rightfully subject to criticism and question is it's unclear why he did an about-face. And I think his original position in terms of not being sold on the bill was probably the right one. The bill had a host of problems, not the least of which is if you spend 8 years demonizing the Affordable Care Act, and in that time you do the demonizing, but you didn't bother to sit down and think through what the comprehensive replacement would be, that's just stupidity. And that was the problem with the bill. In addition to what David pointed out, I would argue that it didn't go far enough in terms of it left more people uninsured than before, and it didn't cost any less. That doomed it to failure. And finally, the Freedom Caucus. Remember, these are the folks who got John Boehner so disgusted, he jumped up and gave up the speakership. So their antics shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
And Nick Garcia rounds out our panel, Deputy Bureau Chief with Chalkbeat, Colorado. So Ken Buck makes the decision to go with President Trump on this one rather than the House Freedom Caucus. Do you think this is a first sign of the House Freedom Caucus possibly losing some of their influence?
I don't think this is the first sign. I think it is new evidence that this is going to happen. But I think that what Ken Buck flip-flopping here is, one, it's too little too late. I mean, the bill's already dead, so it's kind of pointless. I don't know why he did it. But secondly, it's just more evidence of how rushed this process was, where I don't think lawmakers really were able to get their arms around the bill, and it's just led to so much confusion about where people were on the process.